And so we're going to talk on that topic today. And I have a guest here that I'm going to ask lots of questions, how to embrace the power of change. So my name is Sigrid de Karst. I help women entrepreneurs to impact and inspire more people in more places with a book. And I am excited today to welcome Desi Jagger here with me. Hello, Desi.
Hi, Sigrid.
Great to have you here, that you could make the time. I'm looking forward to all your insights on this topic. Now, Desi is a certified leadership coach, and she helps leaders to sustain peak performance in times of complex change, such as post-merger integration and organizational restructure. And Desi does that through one-on-one coaching, team coaching, depending on what the situation is. It's really about empowering leaders with the right mindset and tools to bring out the best in themselves and in others. But we all know that change is inevitable. I mean, especially in the environment that we are in right now. It's such a dynamic landscape. People change. All sorts of things are changing. And leaders of large organizations are often at the forefront of navigating such organizational restructure and managing the teams through uncertain times. And then the people in the teams, of course, they feel the change too. So handling change applies equally in life, of course, as well. And sometimes I would say it can even apply more so, be more unsettling for women. And I don't want to just focus on that, but I think it's an element to bring in, because there was a lot of interesting comments on the posts that Desi and I did recently around this topic. And I will bring up some of those comments to talk more about and ask more about that. So Desi, from your perspective, what does it really truly mean to embrace change, and where are you coming from with that at all? Where did it start for you? Tell us a bit, please.
Wow, we're starting with a very big question. What does it mean to embrace change? I think this is a phrase that is kind of thrown around, but secretly, or maybe not so secretly, we're all terrified of that concept. Biologically, we are created to avoid and run away from things which are different or things which are changing, because they might be potential danger. And so the concept of embracing change, as lovely as it sounds, is a journey. It is not, an overnight miracle. It's not a snap of the fingers. And so the way I like to think about the journey of embracing change is starting with where you are right now. So if we think in a very complex situation, like a restructure, for example, in an organization when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's anxiety in the system, it's natural that at first people aren't going to embrace the change. They're going to perhaps avoid it. They're going to fear it. And it's okay to start there, right? So we start with what is right now. And then from this avoiding change, fearing change, then later there is rejecting change. There's fighting change. And it's not necessarily a straight line, but there's a gradual process here. Fighting change, then starting to be a little bit more open, perhaps, when you see that the change is coming. Followed by being curious, experimenting, bargaining, the kind of the change curve, the Kubler-Ross that we've seen. And eventually being open, testing, trying, and then embracing change. So it's a journey. And even when we embrace change, it's not a permanent state where, congratulations, we're now in this
change. Now we're here.
Yes, we're now in this fixed place.
Yeah.
We embrace this change in this moment. And so I always encourage then teams and leaders to look ahead and think, okay, well, what is the next thing that I need to start working through this journey with? So that's how I see embracing change, as a constant ongoing journey with ups and downs.
And I think naturally people that we are, we want to have a finitive, like, this is it, now I can settle down, you know, this is the finish. So it stops. And just to bring the analogy in from my area of, you know, writing a book, people sometimes think, I finished my book, now it's published, ready, that's it, finished. Everything happens by itself. Well, it doesn't. You need to plan for what's going to happen next. Similarly to change, I think, yes, this change, like you said, was a journey to get through. I've got a few tools, perhaps. I may be feeling prepared, but you need to keep working at that, right? Is that, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I always ask my clients is, great, you've navigated this, you're at a peak moment now. Well, how are you building your capacity to handle the future lows that are coming inevitably, perhaps not in this area that you've just experienced, but maybe in another area of your work or life? It's a very unpopular question because nobody wants to think about future change when they have just navigated, you know, perhaps a year or two or more of turbulent change. And yet, this is what makes the biggest difference in our internal capability to navigate change over and over again. We are capable to do that, but we can strengthen that ability.
Yeah, so there was a comment I found quite interesting, and I'd like to have your insight on that. In uncertain economic times, for example, the only thing that stays constant is you. So I found that quite interesting. What's your insight on that? So the change is there, everything changes, but there is a constant, which is you. I could imagine that is sort of somehow how you look and work with leaders. They are the constant in it. What's your insight on that, Desi?
Curious comment. I think there's two ways to look at that. One way is what I call coming home to yourself. And that's perhaps where the comment is coming from, that the external environment changes all the time, the economic environment, the world around us, the organizational structure, what other people think, feel, the way they behave. And yet we need to bring things down to us, right? So what is the red thread of your life? What is your purpose? Where are you heading? What is important for you? Because at the end of the day, at the end of a role, at the end of our life, we are the only assessor of how things went. And so in that sense, at a time of constant turbulence and change, it's helpful to come home to ourselves. I find this helpful as a mindset. I find that this brings a lot of inner peace, and it allows people to craft their story. And that's what you do, right? Helping people to craft a story in the book they write. So that's one element of the only constant is you. You know, I'm alive. Well, yes, so I am here. At the same time, I want to challenge this concept a little bit, because we are constantly changing inside of us as well. Every 28 days, we shed our top cells of our skin, top layers, and new ones come up. And that's not just a biological process, that is also a mental process. Every day when you wake up, you are now a slightly different person. After every event, big or small, you're a different person. And so to say that we are constant and we are fixed can also be a little bit limiting. So the invitation here is, yes, continue to come back home to yourself, knowing that yourself is an ever-evolving concept.
I love that, actually. That is true. So it's almost like when they say there's always two sides to the whiteboard. You know, you can have look at this side, flip it over, look at the other side. There's always two sides to it. So that's really what you've just demonstrated to me, that there's always another angle. Now, I love that, because number one, in being out there with other people, like you are with clients, you are also with friends and family, and just contacts on platforms like the LinkedIn, for example, we are constantly in exchange with other people. So we do get to hear and know about these other sides. It's never just the one fixed one. I think that's a really great concept. do you think, and I don't want to bring it into the male-female scenario so much here, but do you think that particularly personal challenges, when we face those, does it require anything particular, different on a personal level than it does on a business level? And I'm asking that in mind also. Someone else mentioned in a comment here about having enormous personal changes, and this is a female in particular, around things that seem to be more often coming into the lives of us women, you know, as children, changing husband, different work scenarios. So is there a difference in personal situation having to change and adapt to business ones, in your insight?
Yeah, in my experience, what I find is that separating business from personal in a very rigid way often doesn't serve, because we bring our personal self to work every day, even when we try to be very professional and detached. Even people who try to be professional and detached, we bring ourselves into, you know, the office or the Zoom call or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. Equally, when we finish work, we bring home the learning and the worry, even if it's a tiny bit of that. And so, especially now with hybrid working and more flexible working, personal life and business life are merging more and more. And so to say that change in one is dramatically different, and the experience of change in one area is dramatically different from the experience of change in another, I think that's a false dichotomy. Mm-hmm. So the way that I work is very holistic, right? I look at leaders not even as a leader, but as a human being first. And then what are the implications of their work and what they're doing and the change that they're going through to their team, etc. Because that's the only true way to really start.
And do you, in your experience, do you agree that really each change and challenge on our personal level brings us to the next door, to the next step? How much of what we've experienced before do we carry through into the new one? Yes, we can change, but we are sometimes sort of like hesitant of it, or even if we had a certain experience, or especially if it was a not so good experience, and we're more cautious maybe, or we just run straight back into it. Well, how much do we bring into the next change in our lives, in your experience, from yourself or your clients?
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head here, because we're all going through change, through changes that we don't choose. A lot of them we don't choose. But the question is, how are we choosing to evolve? Situations or people that don't want to grow, evolve, and improve, or not as much, and that's fine for them. It's their choice. But this is where the power of our choice lies. What will I make out of this situation? I can't change what is happening. I can choose my attitude, and as you talked about, I can choose what I take in my backpack with me. And so what I find here is that when leaders take time to reflect on the experiences, helping their teams to reflect as well, okay, this was a really tough merger. It was a disaster. It was perhaps a failure. And we learned these 10 lessons. Mm-hmm. Now, how are we going to apply this starting today in our project, in our company, in our lives as well? So that process of reflection, and this is why I love coaching, because coaching is a facilitated process of reflecting, changing, and taking action. So yes, if we don't do anything, we might change a little bit as a result of adversity. But if we reflect and make an effort, then we will change a lot more, and I believe for the better.
And it makes it easier to, I love the analogy of using the backpack, like the visual of it. I can really see, my backpack, how heavy is that? Do I need to throw something away from here? And I think that really highlights that for some people, they just collect everything in their backpack and they are really weighed down by it when they come to the middle time of their life, and then gets harder and harder as they go through, to later stages, especially in the in a business environment or in an employee environment, even as an executive or leader of teams, that would really weigh them down, I could imagine. So from your experience and the work that you do, but also from your personal experience, if you have any of that, how do you decide what to throw away? How do you teach your leaders what to throw away? Or don't they throw things away? I could just imagine it gets heavier and heavier. I have to throw something away. I could just see that if I have a experience that didn't serve me so well, it comes back up at the next opportunity, at the next corner. And I think I know quite well that's not, I need to take that out of the backpack. Is there a way that can be taught, that you are teaching? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll give a personal example here that we can then apply to work. So some years ago, I went through cancer, and it was a very turbulent and really terrifying experience. I learned a lot from that experience. And so now when I reflect on it, I try to reflect on the lessons that I learned, what was valuable for me, what can I celebrate about my growth and my choices. And I try to step out of the emotional experience, because emotions help us to internalize learning and help us to store the lesson in the brain. When things are emotional, it means they are important to our brain. And so our brain firstly pays attention to them and then stores them in a way that is easier to recall later. So emotion is critical for learning. At the same time, reliving past emotions, especially from adverse experiences, doesn't serve us anymore. So, for example, when I reflect on the health journey that I've had, I don't experience the emotions that I experienced then. From time to time, of course, there's a little bit of sentiment. I'm not a robot. But I really focus on, well, what is the story there? What did I get out of that? What are the top 5 lessons? If I were writing a book, what would I ask myself? What wisdom could I pass on to others or guide through, and what wisdom can I be applying, right? And so separating out the experience and the lessons from the experience from the emotion. So now I can talk about the emotions that I lived back in that time, but I'm not reliving them. I'm trying not to relive that fear. Of course, as you have regular checks, emotions come up and fear comes up, and this is very normal, but this is fear in the moment. And I try to ask myself, is this fear that I'm feeling because of this medical check, or is this fear I'm reliving from the past? So, is this from the past chapter? And that's how I would separate. So going back to your question of what to let go, I think letting go, everybody has to let go at their own pace. But one of the coaching questions I ask my clients is, okay, you want this. What are you willing to give up in order to get it?
Oh.
And the answer often is nothing. I'm not going to give up anything. And so then the coaching begins, right? Because we cannot gain something mentally, physically, emotionally without then giving up something else.
Right. That reminds me of the story of whatever the original story was, but a monk or whatever was pouring a cup to the seeker of more knowledge, and he was pouring and pouring and pouring, and the person seeking knowledge said, hey, the cup is over full, we need to stop filling. And he said, well, I can't fill your cup when you are so full of your own thoughts at this point in time. You've got to empty the cup. That's really what you're saying, that stop and think and revisit those emotions. That is a really valuable tip, I think, because often in the day-to-day changes that happen, we forget, we let these emotions from the past overlap the situation at the moment, and therefore we misinterpret what's happening. Is that, am I saying that in a way that it makes sense? Like we're misinterpreting really what's happening rather than looking at the situation now and not overlapping that past into it. And that it can help us then deal better with this change right now, is what I'm hearing. Yes?
Absolutely. So the moment an experience is lived, a memory is created in our brain. And from that moment onwards, that memory begins to change. Even if we don't do anything or get any new information. So over time, the quality, the precision of our memories deteriorates, right? At a different pace for different people, but it deteriorates. So our memory is not as reliable as we would like to think.
I know.
And so acknowledging that and working with our biology allows us also to rewrite our story, right? So if at first the story that I would have told about my health journey was a disaster, afterwards, with time and by reflecting, I was able to reframe that story and find different angles. Is it true? Sure, as true as the first experience, because these are the way that we experience the story. Can I say that I didn't go through the health journey? No, that would be untrue. But what we're discussing here is, how does my reflection on what has happened and what I'm learning from it, how is that evolving and changing? So every day as I live my life and do my work, I get a slightly different insight on what happened to me and what I went through. And that's going to continue evolving. So keeping the door open, and this goes back to the reader's comment about the only fixed thing is me.
Is, yeah.
Yes and no.
Both parts are already there, are right there. So coming back to what you said a moment ago around reflecting on the emotions and bringing in, is it from now or is it from the past? Doing a daily reflection on your day and what you felt or what you experienced, which is sometimes is recommended by other type of perhaps life coaches or something like that, around bringing to the forefront what we experienced today to kind of process it. Is that something that comes into your coaching as well, when it goes around, leaders that need to then also use their new or their change and the skills to manage their teams, that they use that after you taught them? Is that something you work with your clients on?
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of rituals. And one of the daily rituals that I offer as a tool to my clients, or one of the rituals I offer as a tool to my clients, is a reflection template. So at the end of every day, asking two very simple questions. What did I do well? And what did I do not as well?
Right.
So things that I can change, not what happened to me that was out of my control that I didn't like, but what did I do well versus my own goals and expectations, and what did I do less well? At the end of the week, it's about going and reflecting, and then that's when we capture the learning. So what did you learn from that week? Because it's about zooming out, right? And this can be scaled up to month, quarter, year, etc. I have a very structured way of doing reviews. And of course, within the coaching session itself, the last 10 minutes is reserved for, okay, let's zoom out. What is one thing that you're taking away from today? That's my closing ritual question. And it's golden because people take a lot more than they realize they were taking away. and gives them a chance to solidify and store in memory what they've learned.
I think that it is hugely important, because I know for myself that a day can be so busy. You know, I do one thing and another, and I jump from different areas and topics and things and people to the other. By the end of the day, it's almost like a bit of a carousel going around in the head there. And if you don't stop and process that, you're actually remembering very little of it. And I think when you're not remembering, you have much more the chance of not being ready for something different. When you remember what you did, and like you just said, to highlight what did I well and what was not working so well, that really gives you that fantastic stability to see, oh, I did a lot of things really well today. I never thought about that. I have to do that more often, I think. If I asked you, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but to bring for the listeners together what your experience and the power of your coaching is, if you were to give us a couple of tips, 1, 2, or 3 tips that come to mind that the listener can take away from our conversation around the embracing of the power of change, because there is a lot of power in it, both positive and perhaps, if we want to, not so positive. We can make it positive by looking at, I can do this better, from just those 2 questions. Would you have on the top of your head 1, 2, 3 tips for our listeners, Desi, without putting you on the spot?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I am here to be put on the spot, Sigrid, so thanks for that opportunity. Yes, I will share 2 of the tips, of the 5 tips that I give in. I have an inspirational talk that is linked to the health journey and how, what are the lessons for leadership that we can apply in everyday work, and especially in times of change. So I'll share 2 out of those 5 that relate to the conversation today. The first one is that change begins with your mindset. And we talked about how do you embrace change? Well, you need a mindset that is open, for example, right? As you talked about the cup. If we take the cup as the mindset, if the cup is full or the mindset is closed, it's very difficult to work with that. What I see often is that leaders try to create change on a behavioral level with their teams, right? We're going to do this and this and this differently. But people are stuck in their old minds. So when 2 companies merge, yes, there's a new logo, there's a new office, there's new procedures. But inside of the mindset and the heart of people, they are living in the past entity, in the past 2 different companies. They haven't integrated in their mind, and therefore their behavior is forced and not sustainable. So by starting with mindset, I find that when we shift our mindset, it creates different thoughts, different emotions, different behavior over the long term, because that new behavior reinforces the new mindset and it becomes a virtuous cycle. So that's the first tip that I would give, very top level, to the listeners. The second lesson that I've learned that I want to share here is building resilience through celebrations. And you talked about acknowledging what is good that I've done in the day. Resilience, sometimes teams think about this as, oh no, it's another new process and it's going to be really tough and really boring. And, it is a process of becoming gritty, right? But it doesn't have to be tedious and laborious. Building resilience can be really fun. So apart from doing all of the maybe not so fun, but consistency driving pieces, celebrations are one of my favorite ways to build resilience. So for example, celebrating small things, right? At the end of the coaching session, what did you learn? Or at the start of every coaching session, I ask my clients, what are you celebrating about your personal growth since the last session, which was perhaps 2 weeks ago? Sometimes it's very hard for them to find something. They had a terrible 2 weeks, or they're looking for some panacea or some, Olympic medal that they must have won. And over time, they realize a couple of things. One, there's always something to celebrate and acknowledge, or at least to be grateful for our personal development, no matter the disaster around us. And two, that acknowledging small wins along the way helps to build that resilience and store positive energy for the times that are going to be tough, because they're coming. And so building resilience through celebrations, big and small, is the second lesson that I would like to share.
The tip. I think that is absolutely wonderful, and is definitely something I've made notes of it here to go back to, because sure, we need to, our mind is set at any time, but there is always the opportunity for us and the possibility to change. And there are various ways of doing that. And you certainly have got fantastic ways there with your clients from the coaching background that you have to shift the mindsets. The is one of several that can be taken. Let's take that as tip number one. And tip number two, I absolutely think that is fantastic. The celebration of whatever it is. We sometimes are led through marketing, advertising, that our celebration has to be something big and outstanding, person of the year or something. That's not really the case. Much smaller things can be hugely celebratory for us. And as you said, the more we think in a certain way, the more resilience we build, and the more positive pieces of day to day we bring together creates that positivity habit, I'd say, the habitual thinking in positive ways. And I think that could really also take away fear that many people have from one day to the next, especially, I guess, in the times of change, when you work with those leaders and mergers and big company and all sorts of changes within the company. But also for people who want to write a book, they have this fear, oh, am I good enough? Can I really do this? How long is this going to take me? If they stopped and thought, what is it I want to say? This and this and this, and how important is that for people to know? They could perhaps bring themselves much more forward and become resilient and not think in terms of fear, but just do it because they have a message to say. That is enlightening for me. I really thank you for your time today to share that. And I got a really great insight in your coaching and the way you have given us, or given me, the answers and the tips that you have left with us. Desi Jagger, really great to have you here today. Is there something you would like to finish off with on this particular video together?
Is there something I would like to finish off with? Well, thanks for the session. It has absolutely flown by. So thanks for asking me thought-provoking questions, because usually I'm in the asking seat. So it's always a pleasure to be on the reverse side. I would like to leave the door open if there are questions, or in fact, there are always questions for the listeners. Don't be shy, share the questions, share them in the event chat, send them to us personally. So don't be afraid to ask. I love answering questions. I love being able to share. There's so much resources and other things that I can give, and not in a 30-minute conversation. But beyond that, so a lot of people do reach out, and it's an absolute pleasure for me. So please feel free to do that. I'm sure that you wouldn't mind someone asking you
Not at all. No,
all of that as well. So
absolutely, it's all about asking. Just send a message through or put it on a post somewhere, because it also it gets the question out of the person's mind. It gives us the opportunity to see what sort of questions there are out there, and perhaps even come up with another topic to share insights on, because the sharing is part of letting go, emptying that backpack. I love that. I come back to that backpack that we carry, you know, emptying that, sharing, asking questions. Absolutely. And we can easily be reached through the social media for questions or for connections. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Desi, for today. And looking forward to staying in touch and talking more about topics that we are both interested in. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this, Sigrid.